Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Simply Complex YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over Zero Touch 1 episode 102. If you haven't watched episode 101, please stop this right now, go back and check it out. In episode 101 we were able to create a node in Dynamo through Zero Touch, through Z# programming that created a point at default 1, 1, 1. We were able to create the project that you see here with the using statements, the namespace, and the class, and so on. So you want to be familiar with that before we continue on. Alright, so today we're going to actually be creating a line using Dynamo and using Zero Touch. So I basically want to illustrate how that's going to work. So let's go ahead and let's get a new Dynamo one started. I always like to start with design script because if you're creating Dynamo geometry through Zero Touch, it's very analogous to what you do in design script. So in design script, if you want to create a line, then you would just say line.by start and end points, or you can do by best fit. And there's a few others. So we can say this is P1 would be the start and P2 would be the end. And these are basically the input variables. And how do you know? Because when you actually are typing this, if you saw, when you type this out, you can see you put a comma here, and it'll say here that the inputs need to be, the variables need to be a point, a start point, and its type point, and end point, which is point. That's usually flipped with C#, but anyway, it's still showing the type and the name. So start point, end point. That's what you need. So we're gonna say, I suppose we should go ahead and just say start point. That way it's clear. End point. Okay, now because these aren't defined, they're gonna pop out as input ports, and that's design script. We're basically going to recreate this using Zero Touch. It's super easy. If you remember correctly, we're actually going to go ahead and copy this, and what we're going to do is, if you remember, we can't just simply paste this in and expect it to work because there's no context again with this. You need to wrap every object in a method. Methods are also subroutines if you want to think about it that way. So we're going to go ahead and start another one. You can put multiple methods in under classes, and they'll actually show up as multiple nodes under your D geometry directory. And you'll see what I mean once we actually create the point. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to make another method. So you say public class, and then now instead of a point, you have to ask yourself, what do I want to send out? What type do I want to send out of the output port? In that case, it would be a line. That's the type. And then you got to give the node a name. In this case, we can call it D line. I like to use D because then I know it's actually Dynamo geometry node. Okay, now we just need to put in the input ports. The input ports would be the start and end points, if you remember. But in this case, you have to define what types they are. So we can't just say start and end, because in every method, that variable, you need to define its type. So it's actually going to be a point, and then you say space, and then you say endpoint. I know it may seem a bit redundant because you're saying endpoint, but C# has no idea what this is. So you have to tell it, I'm a point, basically. You constantly need to remind C# what type of thing you're dealing with, because it's very type-specific programming. All right, and then actually, why did I do end there? That should be start. I suppose it doesn't matter, quite honestly. And then we say end here. End point. Okay, just like that. And then I think once we hit return, it's going to give us, oh, it didn't give us curly braces. It normally gives us curly braces. All right. Now it's within here that we would need to put in all of our programming. All right, so this D line, we haven't actually defined, we haven't returned it. That's why it's giving us an error. And this line, we haven't turned it into an object, so that's why it's also complaining. So in order to turn it into an object, remember we got to make it something. So we can say d line equals. That will turn it into an object. But Dynamo, again, I mean a C# again has absolutely no idea what type this is. Even though it says line, I know it kind of sounds silly, but you got to constantly remind it what it is. You say, oh no, you're a line space d line. So you say d line, you're a line. So now when I use the variable, then you can do that. Now a lot of times people will combine these, programmers will combine these two lines together, and you'll see it quite honestly a lot like this. I honestly don't prefer to put those together because it helps me, remind me to always define my variable. Another time you may see it say var. Var is just a generic definition of a type, and you're basically saying, okay, you figure it out. But I also don't like to use var because in design script, in Zero Touch, I always want to make sure I understand and control the type. And when var, you're just kind of taking a shot in the dark. But I know a lot of programmers do prefer to use var. I just don't, especially in the beginner classes. I would recommend you don't use it right away. Okay, we're still getting this error here because we haven't returned it, and we're getting an error here because it looks like this is not a definition that is being recognized. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. What you're going to find is that anytime you're in a method, it's asking for to return something. So then you just need to say return, and then you ask yourself, what do I want to return? What do I want to send to the output port? You can quite honestly send anything you want to the output port. I know this is maybe a little confusing. You don't need to send the name of the method because after episode 101, I've been getting a lot of questions about this, and I'm trying to address it in episode 102. You could define a variable, say x equal to 1, and you could send out x if you wanted to. You would just need to change this to double. Okay? So anything you're sending out has to match the type that you're sending out. So this would say return, and then what do you want to return? You want to return d line. Quite honestly, this took me a while to understand how that was quite honestly working. Okay. Alright, so I noticed that we're getting some errors here, and this is where we need to start to be real clear, especially as we get into the later episodes where we talk about how we're creating dynamo geometry and Revit geometry. Now, I quite honestly don't like to just type out line because see how it's starting to get confused with the method above. Technically, when we define a type, you can actually type out the entire type. This means this is Autodesk design script, basically dynamo geometry line. That's basically we're basically lopping this off and just saying line, but it's starting to get confused because it's like, well, what line do you mean? And that happens a lot of times. So I will typically type out this entire thing, even though it's not always necessary. It really helps me understand where it's coming from, because when you start to get into the Revit database, there might be a Revit line, and you may not know which one is it, Autodesk Design Script Geometry, or is it the Revit.db so on line. So that's why I like to define the type. So we're actually going to swap this one out for this line. So we'll go like this, and we'll remove this kind of ambiguous one. So now we say this is Autodesk.DesignScript.Geometry.line. That's the type, space .dline. Okay, that's way better. Now we got to do it again here because it's getting confused again. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and let's get rid of this, and let's go ahead and say paste, and then we're going to start again with line, good. Now we say dot, and now we're going to find the constructor, and this would be dot by start endpoint, and then if you look here in the intelligent typing, it says you need a point, start point, and end point. You don't need to define the types because it was already done as input ports for your method. So you just need to say start point, comma, end point. And then you gotta end your statement with a semicolon. Okay, I notice I'm still getting errors. Oh, it's not public class, it's public static. Ugh. Okay, that's why. It was thinking this was a class. That's another problem. Okay, there we go. Okay, so public class is the class, which is a collection of methods. Public static, meaning it's a static method, and we got two static methods. Okay, cool. So then we're doing Autodesk Geometry dot line space d line. Okay. Now the reason we don't have any other inputs is because these are coming in as input ports, and I think we should be ready to go. All right, let's check it out. If you notice, this is very similar to the point, which is true. I just wanted to show you you can actually create other things with just input ports. All right, so we'll save that, and we will build the solution. Like so. Okay, very good. So let's go ahead and open up Dynamo again, and let's load it in. All right, if you remember in episode 101, all you have to do is go over to this add, and then you can navigate over to where it is. Now in this case, we have just updated the zero touch node, so I'm going to go ahead and say open. Now if you notice that this is the name of our solution, and then this MySpace is the name of the namespace. These just happen to be the same name. I actually prefer them not to be, so maybe we'll change it in the next lesson. And then under D geometry, do you see now how it actually made the two points? Now you have D point node and D line node. Okay, pretty simple, huh? D line node, if you notice, does not have any defaults, which I suppose is okay. But let's see if it works. Okay, so we got input point, start point, input port, endpoint, and then we're sending out a line. Okay, and right there we're returning this as an output port, which is cool. That's all working. Let's go ahead and do the lines. This is 1, 1, 1. I suppose we could copy this, and then we can make a 0, 0, 0 node, like so. See there? And then we can feed in point 1, 1, 1. Okay, 0, 0, 0 to here, and 1, 1, 1 to there. And do you see it just made the line? Super cool, huh? Okay, and that's our output port right there. It's now I got a lot of questions in the last episode. This does not say D line. Did you notice that? It actually says line. If you only have one output port and you didn't do anything special, it will give it the output port name will be the name of the type of I suppose the type of variable or object that you're returning or sending out. So in this case it was point, in this case it was line. If you want a custom name, then you need to do something slightly different, and I'll show you how to do that in the next segment. Alright, in episode 101 I showed how you basically have another node that's showing up, which is just this, and you're like, what is this? My first geometry. What it's doing is it's creating an instance, and you need to hide it. So what you want to do is in the code, you see how we made this a public class? You want to write under that, you want to make a private one. So you'd say private class and then you'd give it the same name, geometry, just like that. And then you go ahead and just enclose that thing in curly braces. I notice that I'm getting in here. Oh, okay. Actually, what we're doing is we're creating a private method like this. And then that'll make that menu disappear. It should. Let's go ahead and close this and then take a peek again. So we're going to go ahead and say build solution, succeeded. Okay, that looks good. And then we're going to fire up Dynamo again. We're going to say new, and we're going to pick our node we just created. And then do you see how now it actually hid that other one, and now we just got these 2 points. Okay, and that's actually how you actually add additional nodes, is they come in as methods. All right, I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode 102 of the Simply Complex podcast, Zero Touch. Thank you, everyone.
Today's episode is sponsored by the San Francisco Dynamo User Group. They can be found at sfdug.org. You can find all their latest meetings and discussions and all that awesome stuff. It is run by a great group of people over there. I know Cesar Escalante, and each month they have content and they record it and place it up on YouTube. So if you're not in the area and you can't join their group locally, join their group remotely and then watch their videos, make comments about it, and talk about how awesome they are. I want to thank San Francisco Dynamo User Group for sponsoring this episode, and go check them out. I know I will.